The cry coming from the manhole broke the silence of the night. Looking inside, she saw a girl covered in fear and mud. She had no idea it was the missing son of a billionaire. From that moment on, her simple life would never be the same. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The thunder sliced through Chicago's sky like sharp knives as Eleanor quickened her pace through the soaked streets of the Bronx. Her worn-out shoes made strange noises with every puddle she crossed. Her hospital uniform, even shielded by her thin coat, was completely drenched. After 12 hours of scrubbing hallways and rooms, all she wanted was to get home, hug her son Nathan, and rest. The church clock struck 9:30 when she decided to take a shortcut through the alley on Maple Street. The flickering streetlights cast uneasy shadows on the peeling walls. Eleanor always avoided that path, but the rain showed no mercy, and her son was home alone. At 10 years old, Nathan was a responsible boy, but a mother's heart never rests. Then, she heard it. Amid the rain and distant thunder, a different sound reached her ears. At first, she thought it was just the wind howling between the old buildings, but there was something else, something that instantly sharpened her maternal instinct. A cry, weak, muffled, but unmistakably the cry of a child. Eleanor stopped, turning to locate the sound. Water streamed down her face, mixing with sweat from her long shift. The cry came again, clearer this time, from a pile of old planks near a sewer grate. Without a second thought, she moved closer. With hands trembling from the cold rain, she began pushing aside the soaked wood. The crying grew clearer with each movement. When she removed the last plank, her heart nearly stopped. There, curled up and covered in mud, was a girl no older than 8. Her wide, frightened eyes locked onto Eleanor, shimmering with fear and hope. "Daddy," was the only word that escaped the child's trembling lips. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She took off her wet coat and wrapped it around the girl, lifting her carefully. The child didn't resist. Instead, she clung to Eleanor as if her life depended on it. Her tiny, freezing body shook violently, and Eleanor hurried toward home, now with a far greater purpose than just escaping the rain. Her mind raced with questions. How had that little girl ended up there? Why was she alone? Where were her parents? But at that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was getting that child out of the cold and rain, giving her safety and warmth. When she finally reached the small townhouse where she lived, Eleanor hurried up the outdoor stairs, balancing the girl in one arm, while searching for her keys with the other. Nathan opened the door before she even found them, his brown eyes widening at the sight. "Mom?" he asked, his voice a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Nathan, heat some water for a bath, please, and grab one of your clean shirts," Eleanor requested, stepping into the small living space that also served as a kitchen. The boy, always sensitive and helpful, asked no further questions. He rushed to the bathroom while Eleanor sat the girl down in one of the chairs at the table. Under the yellowish glow of the kitchen light, she could finally get a better look at her face. Despite the dirt and obvious fear, there was something delicate, almost aristocratic in her features. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Eleanor asked softly, brushing wet strands of hair from the girl's face. "I, Isabella," she replied, her voice still trembling. Nathan returned with a folded blue shirt in his arms and announced that the water was heating up. Eleanor noticed how her son looked at the girl with an expression she knew well, the same look he had when he found an injured animal on the street and begged to take care of it. As Eleanor prepared the bath for Isabella, Nathan stayed in the kitchen with the girl, keeping a respectful distance, but his eyes never stopped watching her with genuine concern. There was something familiar about the scene, as if somehow he understood perfectly what it meant to need help and find shelter. "Do you like to draw?" Nathan asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Without waiting for an answer, he ran to his room and returned with a sketchbook and some colored pencils. He placed them gently on the table near Isabella. The girl looked at the materials with interest, her hands still slightly shaking as she picked up a blue pencil. She began tracing soft lines on the paper, and Nathan sat across the table, fascinated by the way she drew. There was a precision in her movements that didn't match her age. Eleanor returned to the kitchen and watched the scene for a moment, her heart tightening as she saw how the children had already formed a silent connection. "The bath is ready, sweetheart," she announced gently. After the warm bath and dressed in Nathan's shirt, which served as an improvised dress, Isabella looked like a different child. Her hair, now clean, revealed a golden brown hue, and her porcelain-like skin contrasted with the tiny freckles on her nose. Eleanor quickly prepared a soup with the ingredients she had at home. As the children ate, she noticed how Isabella held her spoon. There was a natural elegance in her movements that hinted at a refined upbringing. Her suspicions about the girl's origins grew by the minute. "Isabella, sweetheart, can you tell me where you live? Your parents must be very worried," Eleanor tried, keeping her voice soft and calm. The girl immediately dropped the spoon, her eyes filling with tears. "I can't go back," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "He'll find me." Nathan, sitting beside her, instinctively placed his hand over hers. "No one will hurt you here," he said, with a conviction surprising for his age. "My mum always protects those who need help." Eleanor felt a lump in her throat hearing her son's words. It was true. Over the years, her home had become a refuge for many in need. But this time was different. Something in Isabella's eyes suggested a deeper, more complex fear. After dinner, Eleanor improvised a bed on the couch for Isabella, using extra blankets she kept for winter. Nathan insisted on lending his favorite pillow, the one with the Superman case he'd gotten for his last birthday. "This way, you'll have superhero dreams," he explained seriously to Isabella, who for the first time managed a small smile. When the children finally fell asleep, Eleanor turned on the small television, keeping the volume low. The nightly news was on and she needed to catch up. Maybe there was something about a missing child. Then the report began. A photo of Isabella filled the screen, starkly different from the frightened girl she'd found in the alley. In the picture, she wore an elegant dress and smiled shyly at the camera. The headline made Eleanor freeze. "Montgomery family heiress still missing. Police investigate possible kidnapping." The anchor kept speaking, but Eleanor could barely process the words. Fragments of information seeped into her awareness. Sole heiress. Fortune estimated in the millions. Under uncle's guardianship after mother's passing. Missing for 3 days. The camera cut to an interview with Isabella's uncle, Alexander Montgomery, a tall, polished man in an impeccable suit. His demeanor was controlled, professional, but Eleanor noticed something in his eyes, something that didn't match the concern his words conveyed. "We will do everything in our power to bring Isabella back home," he told the reporters. "She's all I have left of my dear sister." Eleanor looked at the couch where Isabella slept, curled up in the blanket, clutching her Superman pillow. The girl's words echoed in her mind. "He'll find me." Who was he? Why would a child be so afraid of her own uncle? Eleanor couldn't sleep that night. Sitting in the small armchair in her living room, she watched Isabella sleep while her mind raced endlessly. The rain had softened to a light drizzle, and the first rays of sunlight began to seep through the gaps in the curtains when she finally made her decision. She stood up quietly and went to the room where she kept her memories. At the back of a drawer, she found a yellowed folder. Inside were photographs and newspaper clippings that told the story of a social project that had changed her life over a decade ago. Among the photos, one in particular caught her attention, a younger version of herself beside an elegant woman with a gentle smile. Elizabeth Montgomery. Her hands trembled as she held the photograph. How had she not recognized it before? The same eyes, the same face shape. Isabella was the spitting image of her mother. Elizabeth Montgomery, the businesswoman who had founded the New Dawn Foundation, a project that provided work and education opportunities for women in vulnerable situations. Eleanor had been one of the project's first beneficiaries. At the time, pregnant and alone, she found not just a job, but also a friend in Elizabeth. They had stayed in touch through letters for a few years, until Elizabeth abruptly stopped responding. Now Eleanor understood why. A noise from the kitchen snapped her back to the present. Nathan was already awake, preparing breakfast carefully to avoid making too much noise. Eleanor tucked the photo into her pocket and went to help him. "Mom," Nathan whispered as he set the table, "can Isabella stay with us? She seems so alone." Eleanor hugged her son, her heart tightening. How could she explain to a 10-year-old the complexities of this situation? How could she tell him that the girl he already considered a friend was, in fact, the heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country? Isabella woke up shortly after, her eyes instantly scanning for invisible threats. When she saw Nathan smiling at her with a plate of buttered toast in his hands, she visibly relaxed. "I made café au lait too," Nathan announced proudly. "My mom says it's the best remedy for tough days." During breakfast, Eleanor watched Isabella's every reaction closely. The girl ate slowly, as if savoring every moment of normalcy. Every now and then, her gaze wandered around the simple kitchen with an expression not of judgment but of fascination. "Isabella," Eleanor began softly, "I knew your mother." The cup the girl was holding trembled slightly. Her eyes, so much like Elizabeth's, fixed on Eleanor with surprising intensity. "You? You knew my mommy?" Eleanor took the photograph from her pocket and showed it to Isabella. The reaction was immediate. Tears began streaming down the girl's face as she touched the image with trembling fingers. "She always talked about the project," Isabella murmured, "said it was the most important work she ever did." Nathan, who had been silently observing the scene, stepped closer to Isabella and without a word offered her his Batman handkerchief, the one he always carried in his pocket for emergencies. The gesture, so simple and pure, shifted something in Isabella's expression. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "But you have to promise not to tell anyone, especially Uncle Alexander." Eleanor sat beside the children, her heart beating faster. "You can trust us, sweetheart." Then Isabella began to speak, her words pouring out like a dammed river, finally finding a crack to flow through. She talked about the changes that happened after her mother left, about how her Uncle Alexander had become different, about the woman who started visiting the mansion. "Her name is Victoria," Isabella continued, her voice dropping even lower. "She was Uncle Alexander's fiancée, but after Mummy left, they fought a lot. I heard them yelling in the office about papers and money." Eleanor listened intently, while Nathan stayed by Isabella's side, offering his silent presence as support. The girl seemed older as she spoke, as if the weight of her secrets had forced her to grow up too soon. "Last week, Victoria came to visit me in my room. She said she knew I was sad and wanted to take me out. But when we got to the car," Isabella stopped, trembling. "She wasn't the same person anymore. She got angry, said I had ruined everything, that because of me, Uncle Alexander didn't want to marry her anymore." Nathan took Isabella's hand, squeezing it gently. The gesture seemed to give the girl strength to continue. "She took me to a dark place, said if I told anyone, something bad would happen. But I managed to escape when she was distracted talking on the phone. I ran so far until I didn't know where I was anymore. Then it started to rain." Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. Isabella's story revealed much more than a simple case of a lost child. There was a dark plot involving money, power, and people willing to hurt an innocent child. At that moment, the TV, still on at low volume, caught everyone's attention. It was another report about Isabella's disappearance, but this time it showed an elegant woman with perfectly styled hair and flawless makeup, Victoria Sinclair. "We are all devastated by little Isabella's disappearance," she told the cameras, her voice choked with an emotion that didn't reach her eyes. "As Alexander's former fiancée and someone who spent so much time with the family, I urge anyone with information to contact the authorities." Isabella shrank back at the sight of Victoria, hiding her face in Nathan's shoulder. Eleanor quickly turned off the TV, her mind racing in multiple directions. "Uncle Alexander changed all the safe codes after Mum passed away," Isabella continued, now speaking faster, as if she needed to get everything out. "He spends hours in the office with Mr. Sinclair, Victoria's father. They talk about important documents, about transfers." Eleanor frowned. "Mr. Sinclair?" "The family lawyer," Isabella explained. He's always there, even on weekends. Once I saw him taking papers from the safe when Uncle Alexander wasn't home. Victoria had given him the password. The sound of the doorbell cut through the conversation like a knife. Nathan jumped from his chair, startled, while Isabella froze in fear. Eleanor stood up calmly, signaling for the children to stay quiet. Through the peephole, she saw a familiar figure. Margaret, her downstairs neighbor, a woman who always brought homemade bread on Sundays. "Eleanor, dear," Margaret called from the other side of the door. "Have you seen today's paper? There's something you need to see." With a racing heart, Eleanor opened the door just enough to take the newspaper Margaret was holding out to her. On the front page, alongside the news about Isabella, was a smaller photo that made her blood run cold. It was an old picture of Dr. Sinclair, much younger, standing next to her father. The headline read, "Old Connections. Montgomery Enterprises family lawyer was responsible for a controversial labor case 20 years ago." Eleanor recognized that face immediately. How could she forget the man who had destroyed her family 2 decades ago? The same lawyer who had manipulated evidence to secure her father's unjust dismissal, causing him to lose everything he had built over a lifetime of honest work. Eleanor closed the door softly, her hands trembling as she held the newspaper. The memories she had tried to bury for so long now surged back with full force. She remembered her father coming home on that fateful day, his face marked not by tears but by an expression of defeat she had never seen before. Dr. Sinclair had orchestrated everything meticulously, altered documents, bribed witnesses, a web of lies so well constructed that her father, an honest man who had worked for 30 years at the same company, had no way to defend himself. The family lost everything. The house they had nearly paid off, the health insurance that kept her mother's medications affordable, the dignity built over decades. "Mom." Nathan's voice brought her back to the present. He and Isabella watched her with concern. "Are you okay?" Eleanor folded the newspaper and tucked it into the sideboard drawer. This wasn't the time to get lost in old grievances. There were important decisions to be made, and she needed to think clearly. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she replied, forcing a smile. "Isabella, I need you to tell me more about the documents you saw in your uncle's office." The girl bit her lip, thoughtful. "There's a special one. Mommy showed it to me once before she left. She said it was very important and that it was kept in a secret place." "What place?" Eleanor asked gently. "Behind Grandma's painting there's a small safe. Only Mommy knew about it. She showed me once when Uncle Alexander was away. She said that was our protection." Eleanor sat back down at the kitchen table, her mind racing. If there was an important document hidden away, something Elizabeth had wanted to keep secret even from her own brother, perhaps it was the key to understanding this entire situation. The distant sound of sirens made Isabella jump from her chair. Nathan immediately held her hand, a gesture that seemed to have become natural between them in such a short time. "I won't let anyone take you," he declared with the same conviction as before. Eleanor knew they couldn't keep hiding forever. Sooner or later, someone would make the connection, a public hospital cleaning assistant who coincidentally finds the missing heiress. It was only a matter of time before the questions started. That's when an idea began forming in her mind. It was risky, it could go terribly wrong, but perhaps it was the only way to protect Isabella and expose the truth at the same time. "Children," she called, her voice firm but gentle, "I need you to trust me. I'm going to do something that might seem scary at first, but I promise it's to protect all of us." Isabella looked at her with those eyes so much like Elizabeth's. "Are you going to turn me over to Uncle Alexander?" "No, sweetheart. I'm going to do something very different. I will go to your uncle, yes, but not to hand you over. I'm going to help him see the truth right in front of him." Eleanor picked up her old phone and began dialing a number she had memorized the night before while watching the news reports. The number for Montgomery Enterprises, which appeared in every story asking for information about Isabella. "Please," she said when a voice answered on the other end, "I need to speak with Mr. Alexander Montgomery. Tell him it's about his sister Elizabeth and about a safe behind Mrs. Montgomery's portrait." There was a long silence on the line, followed by sounds of movement. When the man's voice finally came through, it was deep and tense. Who is this? My name is Eleanor Souza. I knew your sister many years ago in the New Dawn project, and now I need you to listen to me very carefully. There are people close to you who aren't who they seem to be. The Montgomery Enterprises. Building stood imposingly in the financial heart of Chicago, its mirrored windows reflecting the still, cloudy morning sky. Eleanor, wearing her only formal outfit, a black skirt and navy blazer bought on sale 2 years ago, clutched her worn purse tightly as she crossed the marble lobby. She had left the children with Mrs. Margaret, her trusted neighbor. Nathan promised not to leave Isabella's side for even a second, and the girl, though visibly nervous, seemed calmer in her friend's presence. Mrs. Souza, an elegant secretary, approached her as soon as she stepped off the elevator on the top floor. "Mr. Montgomery is expecting you." Upon entering the office, Eleanor was immediately struck by the panoramic view of the city. Alexander Montgomery stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, exuding an aura of power and control that made the office feel small. "Mrs. Souza," he turned, his eyes studying her intently. "I must admit your call caught me off guard. Not many people know about that particular vault." Eleanor held her composure, remembering the advice her mother always gave: keep your head high even when your legs tremble. "Mr. Montgomery, before anything else, you need to know that your niece is safe." The businessman took a step forward, his expression shifting instantly. "You know where Isabella is?" "Yes, and she's fine, but there are things you need to know before you see her." Eleanor paused, carefully choosing her next words. "Your ex-fiancée, Victoria, she isn't who you think she is." Alexander frowned, but before he could respond, the office door opened. Victoria Sinclair walked in, her high heels clicking against the marble floor. For a moment, her perfectly made-up face showed surprise at seeing Eleanor, but she quickly regained her composure. "Alexander, darling, I didn't know you had company," she said, her honeyed voice contrasting with the cold glint in her eyes. Eleanor felt every instinct in her screaming in warning. Confronting Victoria so soon hadn't been part of her plan, but now there was no choice. "Mrs. Sinclair," Eleanor began, keeping her voice steady, "what a coincidence to find you here. Isabella told me so much about you." Victoria's smile froze for a split second. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" "Someone who knew Elizabeth," Eleanor replied, turning back to Alexander. "Someone who knows your sister would never leave her fortune in the hands of people she didn't trust completely." Alexander walked to his desk, his face now a mask of concern. "What exactly are you talking about?" "About the document in the secret vault, the one that Elizabeth hid because she knew she couldn't trust everyone around her." Eleanor pulled the old photo with Elizabeth from her bag. "Your sister taught me so much about trusting my instincts, and now those same instincts tell me there are people in this room who don't have Isabella's best interests at heart." Victoria laughed, a hollow sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Alexander, you're not going to believe this." "This hospital employee, are you? It's obvious she's just after money." "How do you know where I work?" Eleanor asked softly. "I never mentioned it." The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander looked from one to the other, years of trust beginning to crumble before his eyes. "Victoria," he said slowly, "how did you know where she works?" It was at that moment the door opened again, and Dr. Sinclair hurried into the office. When he saw Eleanor, his aged face visibly paled. "You!" he exclaimed, his voice betraying a recognition that shouldn't have existed. Dr. Sinclair tried to regain his professional composure, but the damage was already done. His moment of recognition had confirmed all of Eleanor's suspicions. "Alexander," Eleanor said, keeping her eyes locked on the businessman, "your lawyer recognizes me because 20 years ago he destroyed my father's life, and now he's about to do something similar to your niece." Victoria moved quickly toward the door, but Alexander was faster. "No one leaves this room until we understand exactly what's happening here." "This is ridiculous," Dr. Sinclair protested, adjusting his expensive tie with trembling fingers. "This woman is obviously trying to manipulate us. She's probably part of some extortion scheme." Eleanor opened her bag again and pulled out the newspaper Margaret had given her. "The press is already starting to connect the dots, Dr. Sinclair. How many other cases like my father's have you manipulated over the years? How many families have you destroyed to benefit your privileged clients? Alexander took the newspaper, his eyes quickly scanning the article. His face gradually changed, suspicion giving way to painful understanding. "The documents you've been requesting these past weeks," he said slowly, turning to his lawyer. "The changes to Elizabeth's will that you insisted were necessary. They were necessary," Victoria interrupted, her mask of calm finally crumbling. "You think you can manage this entire empire alone?" "You needed me, Alexander. You needed us." "Us?" Alexander asked, his voice laced with restrained anger. "Or did you need someone to manipulate while you siphoned off my niece's inheritance?" Eleanor watched the scene unfold, recognizing the exact moment Alexander began piecing everything together. She could see in his eyes the same look Isabella had, the look of someone finally seeing the truth behind an elaborate lie. "Where is my niece?" he asked, turning to Eleanor. "In a safe place," she replied, "with someone protecting her, not out. Of self-interest, but compassion. The same compassion your sister showed when she created the New Dawn project." Alexander walked to the large portrait on the wall, a painting of his mother. Carefully, he removed it, revealing the small safe Isabella had mentioned. Victoria took a step forward, but stopped at Alexander's warning glare. "Elizabeth was always the smarter of the two of us," he murmured, his fingers working the lock's mechanism. "She knew something like this could happen." The safe opened with a soft click. Inside lay a yellowed envelope sealed with the Montgomery family crest. Alexander opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the pages with growing emotion. "It's their will," he said finally. "Not the official one filed with the courts, but a personal document from Elizabeth. His voice faltered for a moment. "She foresaw all of this." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. Elizabeth Montgomery had been more than just a benefactor. She was a woman who could see beyond appearances, who planned not just for the present, but for a future she might not live to witness. "She specifies here," Alexander continued, his voice now steadier, "that in the event of her passing, she wished for Isabella to be raised by someone who shared her values, someone who understood the true meaning of family and justice." His eyes met Eleanor's, and in that moment a silent understanding passed between them. Laura's words, written years earlier, seemed to echo through the luxurious office. True. Wealth isn't found in bank vaults but in the hearts of people. Victoria let out a nervous laugh, breaking the reflective moment. "You can't be serious. An informal will, that holds no legal weight." "Perhaps not," Alexander replied, his tone calm but firm, "but it holds moral weight, and that's enough to make me see what I should have recognized long ago." He walked to his desk and pressed the intercom button. "Sandra, call security and corporate police, please, and contact our legal department immediately." Dr. Sinclair stepped forward, his face red with fury. "You can't do this. We have contracts, agreements." "Contracts built on lies," Alexander interrupted. "How much were you paid to manipulate company documents? How much did Victoria promise you from Isabella's inheritance?" Eleanor watched the scene with a mix of relief and apprehension. Her instincts told her this moment of confrontation was only the beginning of a long journey of revelations. "Mr. Montgomery," she said softly, "there's something else you need to know. Something Isabella told me about the days she spent with Victoria." As Eleanor recounted the events that led to Isabella's escape, Alexander's expression transformed. The mask of the calculating businessman gave way to the face of an uncle who finally understood the terror his niece had endured. "She's with your son, isn't she?" he asked suddenly. "The boy in that old photo with you and Elizabeth." Eleanor nodded. "Nathan, they developed a special connection. He protected her from the very beginning, without knowing who she was, without asking for anything in return." The office door opened, and 2 security guards entered, accompanied by a woman in a suit, whom Eleanor assumed was from the legal department. Victoria tried once more to head for the exit, but was stopped. "Take these 2 into custody," Alexander ordered, pointing at Victoria and her father, "and call the police. We have an attempted kidnapping and fraud to report." As the security guards escorted Victoria and Dr. Sinclair out of the office, Alexander turned to Eleanor. His expression had softened considerably. "You could have asked for money," he said. "You could have used Isabella as leverage. Why didn't you?" Eleanor smiled, thinking of her small apartment, the bills that were always tight, the overtime hours at the hospital. "Because your sister taught me that there are things more valuable than money. She gave me a chance when I needed it most, showed me I had worth beyond my social standing." Alexander walked to the window, gazing at the city stretching below. Elizabeth always said wealth without purpose was like a garden without flowers, beautiful from afar, but lifeless up close. He turned to Eleanor, his eyes gleaming with newfound determination. "I'd like to meet your son, and if you'll allow me, I'd like to offer you a proposal, not as a reward, but as a way to honor my sister's legacy." Eleanor felt her heart race. "What kind of proposal?" "The New Dawn project has been practically abandoned since Elizabeth passed. I never had the courage to continue it alone. But now, seeing how you protected Isabella, how your son welcomed her, maybe it's time to breathe new life into Elizabeth's dream." He picked up the phone and began dialing a number. "I'll have my driver pick up the children. It's time we start rebuilding this family the right way this time." Eleanor watched as Alexander made the call, her thoughts drifting to Nathan and Isabella. Two children who, in less than 2 days, had proven that family goes far beyond blood ties. It was as Elizabeth always said, sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places. The executive car from Montgomery Enterprises came to a smooth stop in front of the small building where Eleanor lived. Alexander insisted on accompanying her, even when she suggested it might be better for him to wait at the office. "I need to do this right," he said, as they climbed the stairs. "I need to show Isabella that I've changed." When they reached the apartment, Mrs. Margaret opened the door before they even knocked. Her eyes widened at the sight of the polished businessman standing beside Eleanor, but her surprise soon gave way to a knowing smile. "The children are in Nathan's room," she whispered. "They've been drawing all morning. That girl has a special talent with colors." Eleanor motioned for Alexander to follow. As they approached the bedroom door, they heard the children's voices lost in some game. Alexander paused, his hand trembling slightly as it hovered over the doorknob. "Will she forgive me?" he murmured, more to himself than to Eleanor. "Children have an incredible capacity to forgive," Eleanor replied softly, "especially when they sense the regret is sincere." When they opened the door, the scene before them made Alexander freeze where he stood. Isabella and Nathan sat on the floor, surrounded by dozens of drawings. But these weren't just any drawings. They were portraits of the Montgomery family, including one particularly touching one of Elizabeth, smiling exactly like in the photo Eleanor had shown. "Uncle Alexander?" Isabella's voice was small, hesitant, but there was no fear in it. Alexander slowly knelt, keeping a respectful distance. "Isabella, my dear, will you forgive me? I was so blind." The girl looked at Nathan, as if seeking confirmation that it was okay. The boy gave a slight nod, a small smile on his face. "Mom always said that sometimes good people make bad choices because they're sad or confused," Isabella said, her voice growing stronger. "You were sad and confused, weren't you?" Alexander couldn't hold back his tears. "I was, very much. After your mother left, I lost myself. I let the wrong people get close, trusted those I shouldn't have." Nathan, who had been silently observing until then, stood up and picked up one of the drawings from the floor. It was a colorful illustration showing 4 people holding hands, him, his mother, Isabella, and Alexander. "We made this for you," he said, handing the paper to Alexander. "Isabella said you'd like it because it has everyone together." Alexander took the drawing with trembling hands, his eyes tracing every detail. Eleanor noticed how especially moved he seemed by the way the children had portrayed everyone smiling, united, like a real family. "Is everything okay now?" Isabella asked, her voice a mix of hope and caution. "Victoria, She won't come back? No. Sweetheart, never again, Alexander assured, his voice steady for the first time since they'd entered the room. She and her father won't be able to hurt anyone else. Eleanor watched the interaction with a full heart. It was as if she were witnessing the birth of something new, something Elizabeth had dreamed of. A family united not by obligation or self-interest, but by genuine love. Uncle Alexander, Isabella continued, now more excited, did you know Nathan's mom makes the best soup in the world, and that he has a whole superhero collection, and that— The girl's words flowed with growing enthusiasm, as if a dam of pent-up joy had finally burst. Alexander listened to every word with rapt attention, his eyes shining with a mix of remorse and gratitude. Nathan, meanwhile, had moved closer to his mother, wrapping his arms around her waist as he watched the scene. "Mum," he whispered, "can we be a real family now?" Eleanor kissed the top of her son's head, overwhelmed by the realization that somehow Elizabeth Montgomery's dream was coming true in a way no one could have foreseen. The seed of kindness she had planted years ago was finally blooming, binding lives that fate had once torn apart. The afternoon passed slowly, the winter sun casting golden shadows through the small apartment window. Margaret had prepared hot chocolate for everyone, and now they sat in the simple yet cozy living room, planning their next steps. "The New Dawn project," Alexander explained, holding his cup with both hands, was Laura's pride. She believed that transforming lives wasn't just about giving money, but about creating real opportunities for growth. Eleanor nodded, remembering the vocational courses, the daycare centers for working mothers, the psychological support. "It was more than a social project," she said. "It was a support network that changed the lives of hundreds of women." "And now," Alexander continued, looking meaningfully at Eleanor, "I need someone who understands that vision to help revitalize it. Someone who has lived that transformation and knows exactly what others need." The children, who had been playing with drawings on the carpet, stopped to listen. Nathan looked at his mother with unmistakable pride on his face. "Are you offering me a job?" Eleanor asked, her voice tinged with surprise. "I'm offering a partnership," Alexander corrected. "I want you to be the executive director of the project. You understand the real needs of the people. You have the hands-on experience. And most importantly, your heart is in the right place." Eleanor felt her hands tremble slightly. It was an opportunity that would completely change her life, but there was something even more important to consider. "What about the children?" she asked, glancing at Nathan and Isabella, who were now fully engrossed in the adults' conversation. Alexander smiled, a genuine smile that brightened his tired face. "I've already thought of that too. There's an empty apartment in the same building where I live. It's the penthouse next to mine. Elizabeth always said she wanted to turn it into a home for someone special." "A penthouse?" Nathan asked, his eyes wide. "We'd get to live there." "If your mother accepts," Alexander replied, looking hopefully at Eleanor. "That way Isabella can have you nearby whenever she wants, and you can manage the project more easily." Isabella jumped up, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Please, Aunt Eleanor, then Nathan can go to the same school as me and we can study together and play every day." Eleanor looked at her son, who was practically vibrating with anticipation, at Isabella, who already felt like a real niece, and at Alexander, who waited for her answer with a mix of hope and anxiety. "There's one condition," she said finally, her voice firm but gentle. "The project needs to be exactly as Elizabeth envisioned. No unnecessary bureaucracy, no impossible demands. We truly need to make a difference in people's lives." Alexander extended his hand to her. "You have my word, and to ensure that, I want you to have full autonomy to make the necessary decisions." When Eleanor shook Alexander's hand, sealing their agreement, she felt as if Elizabeth were there, smiling in approval. It was as if a circle had closed. The woman who had received help years ago was now in a position to help others. "So," Nathan asked, his voice overflowing with joy, "does this mean we're a family now?" Isabella didn't wait for an answer. She ran to hug Nathan, then Eleanor, and finally her uncle. The best family, she declared with the certainty only a child could have. Mom always said family is who we choose with our hearts. Eleanor watched the children celebrating, Alexander smiling genuinely for the first time since she'd met him, and Mrs. Margaret discreetly wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. It was more than a happy ending. It was a new beginning, built on the foundations of love, trust, and hope that Elizabeth had left as her true legacy. The move happened on a Sunday morning, 2 weeks after that revealing afternoon. Eleanor watched the few pieces of furniture she owned being loaded onto the moving truck, each item telling a story of struggles and triumphs. Nathan was beaming, running back and forth with his boxes of toys and books, eager to see their new home. The new apartment was far more than Eleanor could have dreamed. The penthouse took up the entire top floor of the elegant building in Beverly Hills, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city. But it wasn't the luxury that impressed her. It was the warmth Alexander and Isabella had worked so hard to bring to the place. "Look, Mom," Nathan shouted, running down the hallway. "My room has a huge desk, and there's even a special shelf for my superhero books." Isabella was right behind him, just as excited. "And there's a door that connects straight to my apartment." Uncle Alexander had a passageway built between the penthouses. Eleanor smiled, touched by the care Alexander had shown in every detail. He wasn't just offering them a place to live, he was creating a real home for all of them. "Eleanor?" Alexander's voice brought her back from her thoughts. He was standing at the door holding an elegant briefcase. "Sorry to interrupt the unpacking, but I thought you'd want to see this." Inside the briefcase were the first plans for the revitalization of the New Dawn project, blueprints for new training centers, partnership proposals with companies for internship programs, and plans to expand medical and psychological care. "This is," Eleanor began, her voice trembling. "Laura's dream," Alexander finished, "but now with your special touch. I noticed you've already made several notes on the preliminary drafts." It was true, Eleanor had spent nights studying every aspect of the project, identifying areas for improvement and spots that needed more attention. Her experience as a beneficiary of the original program gave her a unique perspective on what truly worked. "Tomorrow is your first official day as director," Alexander continued. "The team is eager to meet you. Laura always said the best leaders are those who've walked the same path they want to help others follow." The children came running back into the room, now accompanied by an elegant older woman whom Eleanor recognized as Mrs. Carmen, the former housekeeper of the Montgomery family. Eleanor," Mrs. Carmen smiled, correcting herself. "Lunch is served. I made that lasagna Ariana told me Nathan loves." "But how?" Eleanor started to ask, and I told her. Ariana explained proudly. "Remember when we had lasagna at Mrs. Margaret's house? Nathan ate 3 slices." The group made their way to the dining room, where a beautifully set table awaited them. It felt surreal to Eleanor. Just a month ago, she'd been worrying about stretching her grocery budget until the next paycheck. Now here she was, about to start a new chapter in her life, with a family that had come together in the most unexpected ways. "Before we begin," Alexander said, raising a glass of juice, "I'd like to propose a toast. Laura always said, life has a peculiar way of bringing the right people together at the right time." Nathan lifted his grape juice glass, nearly spilling it in his excitement. "To our family," he declared with a radiant smile. "To our family," everyone repeated in unison. Eleanor watched the scene, her happy son, Isabella, finally relaxed and smiling, Alexander looking younger and lighter, Mrs. Carmen gazing at them with maternal affection, and felt a deep certainty that Elizabeth, wherever she was, must be smiling too. The headquarters of the New Dawn project occupied a restored historic building in the city center. On Monday morning, Eleanor climbed the steps of the main entrance wearing a navy blue pantsuit that Alexander had insisted on gifting her. "An executive director needs to dress the part," he had said. The lobby was full of women, some staff, members, others beneficiaries of the program. They all paused to watch as Eleanor entered, accompanied by Alexander. Many recognized her from the days when she herself had been part of the project. "Good morning, everyone," Alexander began, his voice clear and confident. I'd like to officially introduce our new executive director, Eleanor Souza. You already know her, and that's exactly why she's the perfect person to lead the New Dawn project into its next phase. An older woman, whom Eleanor recognized as Mrs. Dorothy, one of the project's first beneficiaries, approached with tears in her eyes. "I knew it," she said, embracing Eleanor. "When you first came here so many years ago, Elizabeth told me, 'Watch this young woman, Dorothy. One day she'll do great things.'" The morning passed in a whirlwind of meetings, introductions, and planning. Eleanor discovered that her organizational skills, honed over years of juggling work and raising a child alone, were incredibly valuable in her new role. During lunch, she received a message from Nathan. He had sent a photo of himself and Isabella, both wearing St. Benedict's Academy uniforms, where they now studied together. "Amazing first day, Mom. Izzy is the best science lab partner." Eleanor smiled, her heart warming. The children's adjustment had been surprisingly smooth. Nathan, always sociable, had already made friends at his new school, and his presence helped Isabella feel more secure and confident. In the afternoon, during a meeting with the social assistance team, Eleanor presented her first major proposal. A mentorship program where former beneficiaries, now successful in their careers, would guide newcomers. "It's a cycle of support," she explained, her voice firm and passionate. "When you receive help and manage to turn your life around, the best way to give back is by reaching out to others." Alexander, watching from the back of the room, smiled in approval. This was exactly how Elizabeth had envisioned the project, a continuous movement of transformation and gratitude. At the end of the day, as she organized her new desk, Eleanor found an envelope that hadn't been there before. Inside was an old photo, her and Elizabeth on the day of their technical course graduation, both smiling at the camera. Alongside it, a handwritten note from Alexander. "Elizabeth always kept this photo on her desk. Now it's your rightful place. She would be so proud to see you here." Eleanor placed the photo in a frame next to a more recent one with Nathan, Isabella, and Alexander. Past and present, united in the same space, showing a path of transformation she could never have imagined. Her phone buzzed with another message. It was a photo of the kids with Mrs. Carmen, all smiling in the penthouse kitchen. "We're making brigadeiros to celebrate your first day," the message read. Looking out the window of her office, Eleanor could see the sunset painting Chicago's sky in shades of pink and orange. It was the same sky she had watched years ago, walking home exhausted after long shifts at the hospital. But now that sky no longer marked the end of a grueling workday. It was the beginning of a new journey, one Elizabeth had somehow prepared for her long ago. 3 months had passed since Eleanor took over as director of New Dawn. Autumn arrived in Chicago, bringing winds of change that went far beyond the temperature. In the project's meeting room, Eleanor presented the first quarter results to the board. "In 90 days, she explained, displaying charts and photos on the screen, "we've tripled the number of women served. The mentorship program now has 50 former beneficiaries serving as guides, and our employment rate has reached 85%. Alexander, seated at the head of the table, couldn't hide his pride. The project hadn't just been revived, it was surpassing all of Elizabeth's original expectations. "But the numbers are only part of the story," Eleanor continued, her voice soft but firm. "Let me introduce someone special." The door opened, and Mrs. Margaret, her former neighbor, stepped timidly into the room. She looked different, more put together, wearing a simple yet elegant blazer, her graying hair neatly combed. "Mrs. Margaret is our newest professional baking instructor," Eleanor announced. "Her breads and cakes, which were always a hit in our neighborhood, are now helping other women achieve financial independence through culinary skills." The older woman smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "At 65, I never imagined I'd have a new career, that I'd be teaching others and watching them start their own businesses." After the meeting, as they walked through the project's halls, Alexander remarked to Eleanor how the spirit of the place had changed. The walls, once austere, now displayed photos of the women served and their ventures. The sound of conversations and laughter echoed from the classrooms and workshops. "Do you know what impresses me the most?" he said. stopping in front of a photo mural. How the children were also affected by all of this. Eleanor smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. Nathan and Isabella had started a book club at school, inspired by the stories they heard from the women in the project. Every Saturday, they gathered with other students to read and discuss books about resilience and social change. "They're learning they can make a difference," Eleanor replied, "even though they're young." That afternoon, when she arrived home, Eleanor found a surprise waiting on the penthouse terrace. The children had organized a small art exhibit with drawings they and other kids from the project, children of the women being helped, had made. "We had an idea, Mom," Nathan explained, practically jumping with excitement. "What if we held art workshops for the kids while their mums are in class?" Isabella added, "Many of them don't have anyone to leave their children with, and art helps us express our feelings, right? That's how I started feeling better after everything that happened." Eleanor hugged them both, her heart overflowing with pride. It was amazing how the children hadn't just adapted to the changes in their lives, but were actively taking part in transforming others' lives too. Alexander, who had arrived shortly after Eleanor, watched the scene with a smile. "Elizabeth always said the biggest changes start with the smallest actions," he remarked, stepping closer to the group. "Uncle Alexander," Isabella ran to hug him, "look at the drawing I made of Mom." It was a delicate portrait, showing Elizabeth in the middle of a flower garden. But the most touching part was the small figures around her: Eleanor, Nathan, Alexander, and Isabella herself, all holding hands in a circle of protection and love. "She's always watching over us," Isabella explained softly. "But now there are more people in our family to take care of each other too." On a particularly busy afternoon at New Dawn, Eleanor received a special visitor in her office. Dorothy, Alexander's former secretary, had brought a box of documents found during the reorganization of the company's office. "We found these in an old file," Dorothy explained, placing the box on the desk. "They're letters and notes from Mrs. Elizabeth. We thought you should see them." Among the papers, Eleanor found something that made her heart stop for a moment: a diary. The pages, filled with Elizabeth's elegant handwriting, contained not only records of the project, but also deep reflections on family, love, and transformation. "Today I met a young mother," read one entry, dated the day Eleanor had first arrived at the project. "There's something special about her, a strength she doesn't even recognize yet. Her son has the same determined eyes. Something tells me they'll be important for the future I dream of building." Eleanor couldn't hold back her tears as she read those words. It was as if Elizabeth had somehow foreseen everything that would happen. The sound of children's laughter filled her office. Nathan and Isabella had arrived from school, accompanied by Alexander. It was Thursday, the day they always had lunch together at the project. "Mum, you won't believe it," Nathan exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. "Our idea for the art workshops? The principal at school wants to implement something similar there too. She said we could even create a youth volunteer program." Isabella added, "And we already have 10 students who want to join. They want to help other kids just like we do here." Alexander smiled, adjusting his tie. "Looks like we have a new generation of social change makers." Eleanor carefully placed Elizabeth's diary back in her desk drawer. She looked at her family, because that's what they had become, a family bound not by blood, but by choice and love, and felt a wave of gratitude. "How about we have lunch in the garden today?" she suggested. "It's too beautiful a day to stay inside." The project's garden was one of the most visible transformations of recent months. What was once an abandoned space had become an urban oasis with flower beds, a community vegetable patch, and gathering areas. The women supported by the project often met there to share stories and dreams. As they walked to the garden, they found Dorothy leading a gardening class for a group of women. Spotting Isabella, she smiled and waved. "Come see what we planted." "Last week," she called, "the seeds Isabella picked are already sprouting." The group gathered around the flower beds where tiny green shoots were breaking through the dark soil. Isabella knelt beside one of them, gently touching the tender leaves. "They're sunflowers," she explained proudly. "Mom always said they're like people, always seeking the light, even on cloudy days." Alexander placed his hand on his niece's shoulder, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of you, sweetheart, of all of us." Nathan, who had been watching the scene, grabbed his backpack and pulled out his sketchbook. "Can I draw a portrait of us here in the garden, with the sunflowers and everyone together?" "Of course you can, son," Eleanor replied, sitting on one of the benches. "In fact, I think we should make copies of that drawing. It'll look perfect on my office wall, right next to the photo of your future art school graduation." The children laughed at the joke, but there was truth in Eleanor's words. The future, which once seemed so uncertain and frightening, now stretched before them like a sunlit path full of possibilities and hope. The New Dawn Auditorium was packed that special evening. It was the first graduation ceremony for the new vocational training classes, and the air was thick with emotion and anticipation. On stage, Eleanor adjusted the microphone, about to begin her speech. "A year ago," she started, her voice clear and emotional, "many of you walked through those doors carrying dreams that seemed impossible. Today, I see in your eyes not just the fulfillment of those dreams, but the certainty that even greater ones are possible." In the front row, Nathan and Isabella watched proudly. Beside them, Alexander tried to hide the emotion that made his eyes glisten. The children had insisted on helping organize the event, creating special decorations and even a documentary video featuring testimonials from the graduates. "But tonight isn't just about certificates and professional achievements," Eleanor continued. "It's about transformation, about discovering that family isn't just those who share our blood, but those who choose to walk beside us." Margaret, now the coordinator of the culinary arts program, applauded enthusiastically. Her small treat, business had grown into a cooperative, employing 5 other women from the project. After the certificate ceremony, as families gathered for photos and hugs, Nathan pulled Eleanor aside to a quiet corner of the auditorium. "Mom," he said, his face suddenly serious, "can I tell you something? But you have to promise not to tell Uncle Alexander yet." Eleanor knelt to meet her son's height. "Of course, my love. What happened?" "I saw him yesterday in his office, looking at some rings in a magazine," Nathan whispered. "Then he asked Isabella if she thought you'd like a garden party at the project." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. Over the past few months, her relationship with Alexander had subtly shifted. Between work meetings, family lunches, and shared moments caring for the children, something deeper had blossomed. "What do you think about that?" she asked softly, studying her son's reaction. Nathan's face broke into a radiant smile. "I think it's amazing. Then we'll be a real family, with papers and everything." Before Eleanor could respond, Isabella came running up, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Aunt Eleanor, come see, one of the graduates brought a special gift for you." It was Olivia, a young mother who had arrived at the project 6 months earlier with nothing but a backpack and countless shattered dreams. Now, having completed the graphic design course, she held a framed piece in her hands. "It's a gift from all of us," Olivia explained, revealing the artwork. It was a stunning digital collage, blending photos from the project with quotes from Elizabeth's diary. At the center, an image of Eleanor with the children seamlessly merged with an old photo of Elizabeth in the same garden. "True love multiplies, it never divides," Olivia read the quote framing the piece. "This was in Mrs. Elizabeth's diary, and we thought it perfectly captured what you've built here." Eleanor hugged Olivia, feeling tears stream freely down her face. When she pulled away, she saw Alexander had stepped closer, watching the scene with an expression that mixed admiration, and something more, something that made her heart race. "She's right, you know," he said softly, just for Eleanor to hear. "You didn't just continue Elizabeth's work. You expanded it, gave it new dimensions." The children gathered around, and for a moment, everyone stood in silence, admiring the artwork that so perfectly captured the essence of what they had become, a family that grew not through division, but through the multiplication of love. A week after the graduation, Eleanor was in her office at the project, organizing the semester reports, when Alexander knocked gently on the door. There was something different in his expression, a mix of nervousness and determination she'd never seen before. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, closing the door behind him. There's something we need to discuss." Eleanor pointed to the chair in front of her, trying to steady the slight tremble in her hands. The conversation with Nathan on the night of the graduation still echoed in her mind. "It's about the future of the project," Alexander began, but there was a hesitation in his voice that suggested it wasn't exactly what he wanted to talk about. "And about us." Before he could continue, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. The voices of Nathan and Isabella grew closer, mingled with other childish giggles. The door swung open, revealing the children accompanied by a small group of their classmates from school. They all carried colorful posters and conspiratorial smiles. "Oops," Nathan said, feigning surprise. "We didn't know you were in a meeting." Isabella, however, stepped forward, her face lit up with a smile that reminded everyone so much of her mother's. "Actually, we did know. We just have a special presentation to make." The children arranged themselves in a semicircle, holding up their posters one by one. Each poster bore a letter, spelling out the phrase, "Will you marry him?" Eleanor brought her hands to her mouth, tears already welling in her eyes. Alexander, caught off guard, let out a nervous laugh. "That wasn't exactly how I planned it," he admitted, standing up, "but I think the kids captured the spirit of it perfectly." From his pocket, he pulled out a small blue velvet box. "Eleanor," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "when Elizabeth left, I thought I'd never find someone who understood the meaning of family so perfectly. I was wrong." Kneeling before her, he continued, "You didn't just understand, you expanded that meaning. You showed me, Isabella, all of us, that true love knows no boundaries or conventions." The children watched the scene with eyes shining. In anticipation, Nathan held Isabella's hand, both barely able to contain their excitement. "Over these past months, you've transformed not just the project but our lives. You've shown that family is something we build together, with love, respect and dedication." Alexander opened the box, revealing a delicate ring with a small blue stone. "Eleanor Souza, would you do me the honor of making official what our hearts already know? Will you marry me?" The silence that followed lasted only a second, but felt like an eternity to the children holding their breath. "Yes," Eleanor answered, her voice thick with emotion. 1,000 times yes. The burst of joy was instantaneous. Nathan and Isabella ran to hug their parents, followed by the other students who jumped and celebrated. In the hallway, staff and beneficiaries of the project, who had clearly been part of the conspiracy, clapped and smiled. Alexander placed the ring on Eleanor's finger with trembling hands. The blue stone sparkled under the sunlight, streaming through the window. "It's the color of Mom's eyes," Isabella said softly. "She always said blue is the color of trust and true love." Nathan hugged his friend, now officially his future sister. "Now we're really a complete family." Eleanor looked at the ring on her finger, at the children embracing, at Alexander watching her with love and gratitude. In that moment, she felt as if Elizabeth were there, smiling and blessing this union that had in a way begun through her. The months leading up to the wedding brought a special energy to the new dawn. The women of the project had practically hijacked the wedding preparations, turning it into a collective effort that united all the groups. "It's not every day our director gets married," declared Mrs. Margaret, now coordinating an entire team for the ceremony's buffet. Her culinary students tested special recipes, blending sophisticated dishes with the comfort foods that had marked the family's early days together. One particularly busy afternoon, Eleanor found Nathan and Isabella sitting in the project's garden, hunched over a notebook full of sketches and notes. "What are you two planning?" she asked, sitting beside them. "It's a surprise," Nathan quickly replied, trying to hide the notebook. But Isabella, with a mysterious smile, decided to drop a hint. "We're preparing something special for the ceremony, something Mom would have loved." Eleanor felt her heart warm. It was amazing how the children always found ways to keep Elizabeth's memory alive and present in every important moment. In Alexander's office, the preparations took a different turn. He had transformed the New Dawn project into an independent foundation, ensuring its autonomy and financial sustainability. "I want it to be yours," he explained to Eleanor as he showed her the documents. "Not as an extension of Montgomery Enterprises, but as the legacy you and Elizabeth built together. It was during the signing of these documents that Eleanor found something special, an old letter from Elizabeth, addressed to her but never sent. The envelope, yellowed with time, held words that seemed almost prophetic. Dear Eleanor, there are moments when we can feel the future unfolding before our eyes. Today, watching you with your little Nathan, I had one of those moments. I saw in you the same strength I've always sought to awaken in the women who come to us, the ability to turn hardships into opportunities, to build bridges where others see walls. I have a special request. Take care of my brother Alexander. Beneath that tough businessman exterior lies a heart that needs to learn to trust again. And look after my Isabella. Show her that family is so much more than blood ties. Perhaps by the time you read this letter, I'll no longer be here, but I know, with the certainty only a mother's heart can have, that you will be pivotal in their lives. You have a gift for healing broken hearts and uniting lonely souls. With love, Elizabeth. Eleanor couldn't hold back her tears as she read those words. It was as if Elizabeth had foreseen everything, as if she had planted the seeds of their union long before anyone imagined it possible. That evening, during dinner at the penthouse, she shared the letter with Alexander. The children, listening intently, exchanged meaningful glances. That's why our wedding gift has to be perfect, Isabella declared. It'll be our way of thanking Mom for bringing us all together. And it's going to be the best surprise ever, Nathan added, barely containing his excitement. Alexander embraced Eleanor, watching the children whisper eagerly about their secret plans. Elizabeth was always right about you, he murmured. You really do have a gift for bringing people together and healing hearts. In the garden of the project, the sunflowers Isabella had planted were beginning to bloom, their golden faces turned toward the sun like silent witnesses to a love story that transcended time and circumstance. On the eve of the wedding, the New Dawn project buzzed with activity. The garden had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with thousands of delicate lights woven through the tree branches and pathways lined with handmade lanterns crafted by the women of the project. Eleanor was in her office, finalizing the last details when Dorothy entered carrying an old box. I found this in the archives, she said, placing the box on the table. I think you should see it before the ceremony. Inside the box were dozens of old photographs of the project, all taken by Elizabeth. Among them, Eleanor found one that took her breath away. A picture of herself, much younger, holding baby Nathan, while Elizabeth cradled a tiny Isabella. Even at such a young age, the two children seemed to be smiling at each other. Elizabeth. Close to say this photo was special, Dorothy remarked. She said there was something magical in the way the children looked at each other, as if they already knew they'd one day be family. In the children's apartment, Nathan and Isabella were putting the finishing touches on their special surprise. They had transformed Elizabeth's diary into a multimedia presentation, combining excerpts of her words with music and images from the project over the years. Do you think they'll cry? Nathan asked, adjusting the volume of one of the songs. I'm sure they will, Isabella replied with a smile, but they'll be happy tears. Alexander in his office was also preparing a surprise. With the help of his legal team, he had finalized the documents that would not only formalize his marriage to Eleanor, but also the mutual adoption of the children. Nathan would officially become a Montgomery, and Isabella would take the surname Souza. When Eleanor arrived home that night, she found a note attached to her apartment door. It was an invitation from the women of the project for a special moment the next morning, before the ceremony. We want to prepare you for your big day, the note read, signed by all the course coordinators. Each of us will contribute a small detail to make this moment even more special. In Alexander's penthouse, he found the children asleep on the sofa, surrounded by papers, photos, and electronic equipment. Careful not to wake them, he covered them with a blanket and kissed their foreheads. They worked all day on the surprise, Carmen commented, appearing quietly from the kitchen. I've never seen two children so dedicated to a project. Alexander smiled. looking at the peaceful faces of Nathan and Isabella. They're living proof that Elizabeth was right. Family is so much more than blood. It's choice, it's love, it's dedication. In the project's garden, the final preparations were being completed under the moonlight. The flowers, specially chosen by Isabella, included not only the sunflowers she loved so much, but also white roses, Elizabeth's favorites. A gentle breeze swayed the hanging lanterns, creating a play of light and shadow that seemed to dance among the leaves. It was as if the garden itself was eager for the celebration that would take place the next day. In her room, Eleanor opened Elizabeth's letter once more, rereading those words that now seemed even more meaningful. Tomorrow, she wouldn't just be marrying Alexander, she'd be formalizing a union that already existed in their hearts, a family that had formed through love, understanding, and the ability to see beyond appearances. "You were right, Elizabeth," she whispered into the night. "Family really is so much more than blood ties. It's about choosing to love every day, even when it's hard. It's about building bridges and tearing down walls. It's about turning strangers into family of the heart." The morning of the wedding brought with it a radiant sun that illuminated the new dawn garden, making the sunflowers shine like little golden suns. Eleanor arrived early at the project, as invited by the women, and was greeted by a special committee of fairy godmothers. Olivia, the graphic designer who had graduated in the most recent class, had created a special space for the bride's preparation, transforming one of the rooms into a true atelier. The walls were decorated with photos that told the story of the project, of Elizabeth, and of the new family that had formed. "Each of us prepared something special," explained Mrs. Margaret, guiding Eleanor to a chair adorned with flowers, "because you're not just our director, you're the living example of what the new dawn represents." One by one, the women approached with their gifts. The makeup was done by Anna, who had graduated from the aesthetics course. The hairstyle was handled by Patricia, a recently graduated hairstylist who now had her own salon. The bouquet was created by Daisy, who had turned her love for flowers into a thriving floral arrangement business. Meanwhile, at Alexander's apartment, the children were putting the finishing touches on their surprise. Nathan adjusted his bow tie in front of the mirror, while Isabella fiddled with the flower crown in her hair for the 10th time. "Uncle Alexander," Isabella called, her voice suddenly serious, "do you think Mom can see all of this?" Alexander knelt beside his niece, gently fixing a flower that had come loose from her crown. "I'm sure she can, sweetheart. In fact, I think she planned all of this long before any of us could have imagined." Back at the project, when Eleanor finally put on her dress, a delicate creation made by 3 graduates of the sewing course, there was a moment of emotional silence in the room. The dress, in a soft ivory hue, had embroidered details that subtly told the story of the new dawn: tiny sunflowers, open books, intertwined hands. "There's one more thing," said Mrs. Dorothy, stepping forward with a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate pearl necklace. It belonged to Elizabeth. She always said it should one day be worn by someone who truly understood the meaning of family. When the clock struck 4 in the afternoon, the garden was filled with guests, beneficiaries of the project, past and present, partners, friends, everyone who had been part of this extraordinary journey. The music began softly, a melody specially composed by one of the project's music teachers. Nathan and Isabella entered first, carrying a banner that read, "Love Multiplies." Behind them, other children, sons and daughters of the project's beneficiaries, scattered petals of white roses and miniature sunflowers. Alexander waited at the makeshift altar beneath a floral arch, where Isabella's sunflowers blended harmoniously with white roses. His face lit up when Eleanor appeared, walking down the aisle formed between the chairs. But before she reached the altar, Nathan and Isabella asked to speak. It was time for the surprise they had so lovingly prepared. The garden lights dimmed softly, and a projection began on a large screen that had been discreetly set up among the trees. On the screen, images from Elizabeth's diary began to appear, her words transforming into animated flowers that danced across the display. Isabella's voice, recorded with such care, began to read. Dear friends and family, today we're not just celebrating a wedding, we're celebrating a miracle of love. A miracle that began many years ago when a young single mother and her little son found hope in a social project. The children's presentation continued, weaving excerpts from Eleanor's diary with photos and pivotal moments from the family's history. The final images showed Eleanor finding Isabella on that stormy night, Nathan offering his Superman pillow, the first shared smiles leading up to the present moment. Not a single dry eye remained in the garden when the presentation ended. Alexander held Eleanor's hand, both too moved to speak. It was Isabella who broke the silence, her voice clear and confident. Mom always said true love is like a sunflower. It always seeks the light and grows toward the sun. Today our hearts are like a garden full of sunflowers, all growing together, all reaching for the same light. The officiant, deeply touched, took a moment to compose himself before continuing the ceremony. When it came time for the vows, Eleanor and Alexander chose something different. They invited the children to join. I promise, Alexander began, not only to love and respect Eleanor, but to carry on Margaret's legacy through the love we've built together. I promise to be not just a husband, but a father to Nathan, just as he is already a son to me. Eleanor, holding Alexander's hands, replied, I promise to honor this love that brought us together in such unexpected ways. I promise to be not just a wife, but to keep being a mother to Isabella, always holding in my heart Margaret's teachings about the true meaning of family. Nathan and Isabella stepped forward, carrying the rings on a small cushion embroidered with sunflowers. And we promise, they said together, to always be a family in good times and bad, taking care of each other and keeping Aunt Margaret's dream alive. After the exchange of rings and the traditional kiss, one final surprise awaited everyone. Hundreds of paper lanterns were handed out to the guests. Each bore a single word: love, family, hope, transformation, new beginnings. As night fell, everyone gathered in the garden to release the lanterns. The sky filled with tiny points of light, each carrying a wish, a promise, a memory. The last lantern, larger than the rest, was released by Nathan and Isabella together. On it they had written a special message. Thank you, Aunt Margaret, for planting the seeds of this love. Months later, the New Dawn project had expanded even further. New centers opened in other cities, bringing hope and opportunities to more families. Eleanor and Alexander turned their story into inspiration for others, proving that true love has the power to transcend any barrier. Nathan and Isabella, now officially siblings, continued their book club at school, inspiring other young people to make a difference in their communities. The sunflowers in the project's garden kept blooming, season after season, silent witnesses to a story that began with an act of compassion on a stormy night. In her office at the project, Eleanor kept that first photo Margaret had taken when Nathan and Isabella were just babies, displayed prominently. Beside it, a new photo from the wedding day showed the complete family, radiant smiles lighting up every face. And on the walls of the New Dawn project, a quote from Margaret, now immortalized in golden letters, continued to inspire all who entered. True love multiplies, it never divides.